This is TWiT.
We talked about a lot on Saturday on the new screensavers with Patrick Norton. I was, you know, I'm going to give you an analogy, Renee. You tell me if this makes sense to you. And by the way, there's very, very big news already on this Throttlegate front. I kind of dispute the whole notion of Throttlegate. I think of this as like my Tesla. So my Tesla, I love it because it's got amazing pickup, torque, 100% torque at 0 miles an hour. It can beat a Lamborghini in 0 to 60. It's an amazing car, but you wouldn't want to do an Indy 500 with it because it can't keep up a sustained speed for more than 5 or 10 minutes at over 120 miles, 130 miles an hour because the electric motors heat up and then it actually it throttles it down to a slower speed. But for my purposes, the pickup, the speed, everything it does in my normal day-to-day driving, I don't actually have an occasion to drive 120 miles an hour very often. It's great. And I certainly don't do it for more than 10 minutes. It's great. If I lived in Germany and I were on the Autobahn, I would say, well, I'm going to get a Mercedes instead. But for me, it's great. I feel like that's kind of what I'm experiencing with the MacBook Pro. I've been throwing a lot of the kinds of things I do at it because, for instance, one of the reasons I wanted is Lightroom is such a pig. I wanted to be able to review raw images without waiting. What people suggest is, well, what you do is you put your raw images on the computer, you let Lightroom create previews, go have dinner while it's doing that when you come back. But I don't want to do that. I want to put and review the images now.
You had dinner already.
I already had dinner, and this is fine for that. My compilation when I do a lot of coding, it's so fast. It runs so quick. The programs run quicker. I did a full build of Emacs from 0 in about 9 minutes on this. It took 12 minutes on my 2015. That's about what I'd expect from the different clock speeds. But in those cases I just described, I never go below the rated 2.9 gigahertz, and most of the time I'm at 3.5 to 4 gigahertz. Yeah. It's throttled up. SpeedStep works. I also get, and I was really worried about this, superior battery life because when I'm not doing tough stuff, when I'm just looking at email or the web, it goes down to 1 gigahertz or lower. And I never paid attention to this before, but now because of Throttlegate, I got the Intel widget and I'm looking at all this stuff. I'm getting around 13 hours of battery life until I do something that's really thermal. I do notice that it will not let the processor get above 100 degrees Celsius. That is like the absolute limit. The minute, whatever I'm doing, whether it's handbrake encoding or motion, the minute I do that, it does throttle down. It throttles well below 2.9 gigahertz. One of the things I want to do, and maybe we'll do it before the end of the show, is put Logic on here and see if I can do a giant Logic Pro mix with 100 voices, because that's something a lot of people want to do.
It's also worth pointing out that Intel will not disclose them, but all the AVX2 frequencies are well below the baseline frequencies. They won't tell anybody what they are, but if it's hitting vector, it is normally going to be below baseline frequencies.
So for me and my uses, I like this. And by the way, just to touch on the butterfly key, whatever they did, those silicon domes, I haven't got any breadcrumbs in there yet, so I can't vouch for its reliability. But it's funny because I hated the other one. And Andy, I know you hated it too. I would like you to try these. It's just enough softening when it hits bottom that actually I can live with this. It's not. I like this. I don't love it, but this keyboard's usable, completely usable.
I've tried about 2 hours. I've got about 2 hours logged in on the new keyboard. It's better, but it doesn't. I still don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that.
It's still a deal breaker for me.
Yep.
Unfortunately.
Yep. So let us. By the way, one of the reasons I can't show you the screens is because just this morning, Apple pushed out a firmware update for the MacBook Pros that supposedly addresses, and I know Dave Lee, who was the guy who initially talked about throttling on his YouTube channel, is happy about this patch. It fixes some stuff. Tell us what this patch does, Renee.
So what happened was Apple reached out to Dave once they saw his video because they could not reproduce the situation he was getting. And it sounds like it took a little while before he could reproduce it as well. But they worked together over the weekend. I'm sure nobody got a lot of sleep there. And they managed to figure out what was causing it. And it was a missing digital key. And now there's a lot of debate over what that is because a lot of this stuff is not well documented. And I think, because Intel is super proprietary and Apple is super proprietary, and there's not a lot of information on this stuff. But people are guessing that it was basically either an erroneous or missing registry entry that was not often being hit because none of Apple's benchmarks hit it. None of the pros that Apple had it there for us to talk to, people in the music industry, the video industry, none of them were being affected by it. But it was this mixed workload of red raw footage and Adobe Premiere that was basically bringing the computer to its knees.
Oh, interesting.
And so this patch fixes that missing digital key.
It doesn't,
according to Dave,
fix everything. It just fixes that.
It makes
one
everything
thing
better. This might have been causing some slowdown on a lot of workloads, but not huge amounts. But on a specific workload Dave had, it was causing cataclysmic slowdown.
So, what about my Tesla analogy? Is that a reasonable analogy? Look, most people shouldn't buy an i9 because it is 6 cores. It is a lot hotter. We were able to get, when I was compressing Handbrake and the processor was 100 degrees Celsius, I was able to get the keyboard to about 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, really almost too hot to touch.
Yeah, no, that's very true. So, I mean, Moore's Law or House's Law, whatever you want to call it, the idea that we're going to get double performance every 18 months is dead and dying.
Yeah.
And Intel's had 2 years to, Cannon Lake was supposed to come out on their 10 nanometer process 2 years ago, and they still haven't gotten it out. So what they're doing is reverting to adding cores to increase performance because they're still expected to get year-over-year performance. And so Apple is basically treating these like they treat mobile processors, and that is we still want the fastest single-core performance we can get, but that means when you start hitting these massive multi-core loads, we have to throttle it down because it's going to be too hot. It's going to melt the machine. And that analogy is spot on. You could also look at it like people were complaining, I have a Lamborghini, and it's on a highway in traffic, and I can't let it loose. The reality is we've moved to the cities now, but the thing is, instead of 4 Lamborghinis, you now have 6 Lamborghinis, so you can move 4 more people at the same time, even in traffic. And that's sort of how you have to look at multi-core workloads now.
And I will grant that this is not the right computer for a lot of people. I mean, I'm comparing it to I have an 10-core iMac Pro at home. And if I have the luxury of using that for most of this stuff, certainly for Handbrake or rendering 360 videos, I will use that.
Yeah, that's their alternative. Like if you really want a 17-inch computer with F22 Raptor-sized vents on it that weighs 10 pounds, Apple doesn't make that. They want to make one chassis they can sell to millions of people. So they will gladly show you an iMac or an iMac Pro for those kinds of thermal
I should also point out, according to the disk speed test, we're getting reads and writes around 2,600 megabytes per second.
It's ludicrous.
Which is very fast, but the MacBook Pro, remember, was even faster. I mean, the iMac Pro was even faster. So
this should equal. I mean, all other things being the same, I think this should equal. Because believe they're using the same storage controller and the same striped 2-disc
as
format.
you can see on the Blackmagic speed test, it's fine for 4K video at 60 frames reading, and I mean it's got green checks everywhere. But it is not as fast as the iMac Pro. Now I don't know why not, and maybe there's some other issue going on there. Cinebench score on this, and that was what a lot of people were complaining about was Cinebench, because if you run and I know Cinebench isn't exactly a synthetic, but it isn't exactly not synthetic.
The biggest problem is that Cinebench put out a statement saying they were not optimized for the i9 and that people shouldn't use it. But
well, there you go. So people keep using it. I was in OpenGL. I was actually very surprised able to get 100 frames a second. But the CPU was down below 900. I think it was 853.
Intel also took their power gadget down over the weekend and put up an incremented version, and that's basically I think maintained by one engineer. They don't update it very often.
I have the new the power gadget. I'll show you screenshots though. This is the kind of thing I do, and it is faster. This is the kind of thing I they want to see the monitor. Hold on a second. They're not seeing the monitors. Hold on. I want to be able to give you a screen out. So, but what about my contention that it's like, it is kind of like the Tesla in that respect?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's if you're spending $6,000 on it, it's absolutely a very special. I guess Alex would probably have the best analogy, but it's a very specific set of skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that is, I feel like Apple misses the mark on the Pro side because they are trying to fit it into this tiny form factor, which we don't care about.
Yeah, and we do know, by the way, from iFixit that they did not modify the fans or any of the cooling subsystems. This is the same as last year's MacBook Pro.
Right. And I feel like if you're going to keep on making them and calling them Pro, I mean, your primary audience, I mean, there are a lot of people, you see a lot of people that work in information companies that they want the Pro version so that they can have the Pro version. I don't know what they're using it for. So I think that, I think the folks that are designing these are not pushing them very hard. They're not really those professionals that need it. And so I think it's unfortunate that we do have to consider going to a PC to get the real performance out of it. That's kind of as a Mac user, I mean, we'll put up with it. So I guess Apple's got it, but I think that you are looking at significant slowdown of, purchases. I don't feel hugely like I need to keep on upgrading, and so, until my computer actually stops working, I probably, will be slow to upgrade. I don't think that, it's not enough, to make it, to make it worth it, in my opinion. So, I still have a relatively good iMac. I haven't gotten the iMac Pro yet. I'm a little behind those curves. I just haven't needed it. But I think that Apple isn't really building. We'll see what happens with the new Mac Pro that comes out. I do think the iMac Pro is great. We just haven't had usually we buy stuff against projects.
I think if you're a developer, you'll be happy with this. I think if you're a photographer, I think if you're doing transcoding video, you will not be happy with this, even with the patch.
And I guess if you're a photographer, I don't know if you were that hard off before. I think that's the problem.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, right. So that's the other question is compare this to a current i7 or last year's i7, and you're probably...
Yeah, are you really going to notice? I mean, like the hard part is that as this slows down, this is the problem that the PC industry's had for a long time, which is that everything, Excel runs as fast as it needs to, and other things. So I think that the challenge really is a lot of these apps aren't really, you don't notice it that much from time to time. A lot of people that have been pushing these computers gave up on Apple a while ago. And so the ones that are really pushing it and really need the performance, a lot of them have been dropping off and using PCs or Linux to get the performance that they need. And so there's less pressure on Apple, I think, to do that. But there's still kind of the creative professional that they're going after. And I'm not sure that what they put out makes enough of a difference to, I mean,
it does for me because there's pent up demand. I was on a 2015 and it is definitely, it's 30%, 25% faster than the 2015 i7. So
right.
I'm happy, it's a reasonable upgrade. It's my 3-year upgrade.